It's always about power.
Seattle's dramatic growth over the last decade is going to have a major impact on its future.
When I do that, then some streets show up.
At least 5 of the city's 7 districts need to grow or shrink by thousands of residents. And your input will shape Seattle's new political boundaries in the 2023 City Council elections.
From a selfish perspective, that means we'll have fewer people vying for the attention of our city councilmen. So,
how can the public weigh in on this consequential conversation?
Where an incumbent lives plays no role in how I am approaching these maps.
We hear from 2 key decision makers.
4 districts need to grow, 3 of them by at least 5,000 people.
Redrawing Seattle's districts and political representation. Next on City Inside Out. Welcome to this edition of City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. 7 city council seats are up for grabs next year. But before you consider who you're voting for, you need to figure out where you're voting. After a decade of rapid growth, Seattle has begun a process to redraw its city council district lines to ensure each district has about the same amount of people. Those new lines will determine who represents you on the council and which communities will have the most influence on city government. Every district could be affected, some more than others. So if you want to make your voice heard with the future leadership of Seattle, it's time to figure out where you draw the line. On the north side of Seattle, in City Council District 5, César Garcia is mapping out a new future.
This is the only green space that we have in our community.
The co-founder and co-director of the Lake City Collective leads neighborhood projects like rebuilding Little Brook Park on 32nd Avenue Northeast by lifting up the voice of his community.
We are the only minority-led organization in the entire District 5.
But what's ahead for D5? One of 7 established by voters with a district representative system in 2013 is uncharted territory as the city's district lines need to be redrawn. Census figures show that Seattle has grown rapidly over the last decade, but that growth has been uneven. District 7's population, which includes downtown, swelled by over 21% in the last 10 years. And each district has to have the same amount of people within a 1% range. So, to keep all 7 districts roughly the same size, District 7 needs to shed more than 18,000 people, and District 5 needs to add more than 6,000. But how?
Really, it's about not only about the number or the quantity, it's about reality, it's about the experience, about the barriers that people are facing in different areas.
Garcia says D5's Latino community, one of the largest in any district, has struggled for years to be recognized.
In terms of Latinos, I feel that that the treatment hasn't been the same.
That's why, as the city considers new options to reconfigure its districts, Garcia wants to protect the political momentum he's been trying to build and avoid splitting up the Latino community of D5 in any way.
It's about making sure that the people who are more vulnerable in our communities can have a fair shot.
In District 7, Paula Mueller is optimistic about the redistricting process.
for Queen Anne specifically, I think it's a really positive thing.
She's the chair of the Queen Anne Community Council, has lived in the neighborhood since 1977, and remembers when driving to the east side was a reverse commute.
Some things have changed and some things have remained the same.
She says moving 18,000 people from her busy, bustling district should help sharpen the focus of D7's council representative on fewer people.
It allows us that opportunity to work with our city council member in sort of reprioritizing what's at the top of our pile.
She's also aware that council members who currently live in the district they represent, as required, may end up politically adrift, depending on where the new lines are drawn.
If a particular district representative lives in a boundary community, it's entirely possible that that individual may no longer be able to represent the district they have for the last several years.
With 7 district council seats up for election in 2023, that makes the work of the Redistricting Commission even more critical. With 7 public forums planned and multiple ways to provide comment, before the final map is submitted to the county and state by November 15th. The fact is, with D1, D2, D5, and D6 needing to expand, and D3, D4, and especially D7 needing to contract, change is coming to your city council district. And if you want your voice heard, now is the time.
Keeping neighborhoods together with a cohesive representation is really important.
It's a message that resonates from Queen Anne to Lake City to every neighborhood in Seattle.
For us, it's important to have representatives who, listen to us as well.
It's a time to listen and learn for all of us as Seattle, for the first time, redraws its city council district boundaries. And to learn more about redistricting, we have with us E.J. Juárez. He is the chair of the Seattle Redistricting Commission. And we also have with us former Seattle Mayor Greg Nichols, who was also a member of the commission. Thank you both for being here. And E.J., I'll go straight to you here. So Seattle voted to have city council districts back in 2013, but this is the first time we've had to go through the redistricting process. So for people who might not know what's going on, give us an overview of how this commission was put together and where we are in the process right now to get these lines redrawn.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. So we have a commission that was appointed by the city council and by the mayor. We are all volunteers and we are all nonpartisan, and we are charged with putting together a plan for the next 10 years. Because this has never been done before, we are learning on the fly. We're figuring out what the best practices are and trying to set up a process that can be replicated time after time.
Got it. Thank you. And I know we're going to get into more detail, but thank you for keeping that short there. Mayor Nichols, I wanted to talk to you about this because you ran this city when all the council members were at large, and now we have this council district system. Can you give us some perspective on just how important this work of redistricting is and what impact this has on the average Seattleite?
Sure. Brian, I would go back, and thank you for having us and putting a spotlight on this. Mm-hmm. I would go back to my former life when I was a member of the King County Council. When I ran the first time, I ran in a gerrymandered district. It was a district that stretched from Alki Point to Algona Pacific on the Pierce County line. Mm-hmm. It was easier to walk across it at one point than it was to drive from end to end. It really did, I think, violence to the idea of community. And so for 10 years, during 2 cycles of redistricting at the county, I worked to put it back together into something that made sense to people, rather than something that was designed to elect a Democrat. And it worked. And we now have a functional District 8. So I want to make sure that that does not happen, that the precedent that we set is one that respects the charter that the people passed and respects the idea of community, place by place by place across our city.
Got it. Thank you for that history there. I appreciate that part. So, EJ, let me get to this here, this major issue of dealing with District 7, which includes downtown and South Lake Union. This is where a lot of Seattle's population growth has been happening for the past 10 years. So to keep all our districts roughly the same size, which is the plan here, that district has to shrink by about 18,000 people. And we've seen a few different examples of how this could look from the commission. It's important to stress these are examples, not proposals. Everything very fluid right now. But what feedback are you hearing from the public about the best way to right-size District 7? Because this could affect a lot of the other districts too.
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of feedback, which is a beautiful thing. I think first and foremost, we want to make sure that District 7 is in line with every other district. We can't have our population packed into one place. And because growth is happening in that region, while we can't anticipate and district for future growth, we need to take into account where change has already happened. So when we look at District 7, that's probably going to shrink. And that means other districts around it need to grow. It shifts every line. Not one single district will exist in a vacuum where we can just change those borders and then every other community gets to keep, the borders as they would want. This is really a holistic project that is organic, right? And District 7 in particular, because of the geographic boundaries as well, provides a particular problem for us, or I won't say problem, a particular challenge of waterways, bridges, Queen Anne, Magnolia. There are natural geographies that are preventing both the movement of people and neighborhoods to be connected to each other. So we want to be really mindful of all of those things.
Right. And these districts need to stay contiguous. That's another piece of this too. And so, Mayor Nichols, maybe I can get your input here on District 7.
Do you take the north end of it with Magnolia, put that into District 7, making D7 more of a downtown and business-focused district, or do you peel off a bit of downtown, bring that over to District 3 or 4? How do you see this process playing out? What priorities are guiding your decisions here?
So I would look at it from the other end of the telescope, and that is that there are 4 districts that need to grow. 3 of them need to grow by at least 5,000 people. District 1, which is West Seattle, which is the district in which I live, has to grow by 5,000 or more people. And the only way it can grow is east into District 2. District 2, however, also has to pick up 5,000 people. So it'll need to pick up 5,000 plus whatever it donates, if you will, to District 1, which means then we start to go north with those 2 districts. And that's simply, there's no other physical way to do it. District 5, which is the far north end of the city, also needs to pick up over 5,000 new people. And so it's going to need to grow south. So I start with those 3 and try and figure out how is it that we're going to make sense of growing those 3 districts, picking up population, again, splitting communities to the least extent possible, so that the district at the end, people say, yeah, that makes some sense. But those are the decisions that we're going to have to make. We're going to sit down as a commission, and we're going to take out some maps, and we're going to take what we've heard from the public in these forums, and we're going to try and balance all of those things in our deliberations. And I think it'll be interesting, and I believe the colleagues that I have on the commission are wonderful, and we're going to try and get to consensus. That may not be fully possible, but we're going to give it every opportunity.
Well, thank you for that. And EJ, maybe I can come at this from that other perspective, thinking about the district that needs to grow the most. D5 on the north side needs to add about 6,000 people, and the only direction, as Mayor Nichols said, is to the south there. What is going into your consideration of changing this district? Do certain neighborhoods fit better with D5, or how do you look at that?
So I think there are a couple of different things. First and foremost, it's what the public is telling us. It's how people are defining their communities and how they're telling us what points of interest, what places are most important to keep together. And when I look at District 5 in particular, we're knowing that we have to grow south. It's less about, will Pinehurst be preserved? It's more about, do the people in Pinehurst believe that they can split on 125th, right? Or do they need to be adjoined to Lake City? And what is that connection that keeps them together? Those are really, very subjective evaluations, but they are entirely dependent on what the public is telling us. So first and foremost, as I'm making those considerations, I'm looking at the public comment, and I'm also looking at what are those connections between neighborhoods.
Got it. Yeah, and I think this is an important one. Mayor Nichols, I'll go back to you on this one. We heard from the Lake City Collective in our setup piece there, asking the commission to make sure communities of color, like the strong Latino community that's in D5, doesn't get split up in the redistricting process. So some people in that district who are Latino feel like they haven't been treated the same by city leaders as their white counterparts. I just wanted to wrestle with this race and social justice issue when it comes to changing D5, trying to keep those communities together.
So those are exactly the kinds of comments we want to get back. I sat in on an informational session with the Lake City community, and one of the maps, or maybe 2, that are out there, which are not our maps. They're simply examples of maps that do balance the population, but they have not been endorsed in any way by the commission.
Right.
One of them or 2 of them use Lake City Way as a divider, which makes some sense. It's a very busy state highway, but it also splits the Lake City community. And we heard that from our informational session. So that's the kind of thing that we need to hear, whether we're aware of the damage that a particular boundary might do to the community. We might not be aware of it, and we need to be made aware of it. So that's why we're asking the public to engage in this.
Got it. EJ, I need to ask you the impossible question. Do you Where do you put race and social justice issues? Where do you put business concerns? There's just a lot to juggle here when it comes to the priorities for these different districts.
Well, first and foremost, I think that race and social justice concerns are all concerns. There is no concern that is not intersecting with the priorities of communities that have been historically designed out of power, or the fact that we need to pay, I think, hyper attention to the idea that communities that are furthest from power need to be empowered to have a voice in this process, and that their votes as a bloc, and that their votes as members of the communities that they're in matter. So we are charged with the legal responsibility to make sure that gerrymandering does not happen. Obviously, the legal requirements are first and foremost, but race and social justice is something that, for those that have been at our meetings, comes up at every meeting. We are being really deliberate, and we are being very intentional about making sure that where we can, we are aligning with the ideals both that the city has set forth within the RSGI, but then in our own personal value systems of, I think in this moment, I will speak for my fellow commissioners. I don't think there is a single one of us that would seek a map or approve a map that does not meet our own values and practice around race and social justice, especially in Seattle, where we know we are in this moment of increasing competing crises that are influenced by race. Yep. And that if we are not race conscious in how these are put together, we are doing a disservice to the city.
Fair enough. EJ, I want to ask you another difficult question here. When these district lines change, that could affect current council members here. There's a chance that they might no longer be living in their district and thus could not represent it. What's that going to look like? How does that timing impact next year's elections? Let's deal with this.
Yeah. So, from my perspective, where an incumbent lives plays no role in how I am approaching these maps. That might be different for others, but I'm pretty sure we are all on the same page of we are charged with creating maps that best represent this city and best represent the growth that has occurred over the past 10 years since the initial maps were created. Folks that live in that district are going to have equal opportunity to compete to represent that district. And if an incumbent is in a new district, I would encourage them to consider if that's a district that they want to seek and represent in the future.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And I know there's some timing to that too. There's a certain amount of period they would have to live in the district before they would actually be able to run. Can we talk about that detail real quick?
So, I am not the legal expert here, but there will be accommodations and hopefully enough leeway for filing and for folks to get ready to run. This is not going to happen all at one time. So these positions will be cycled in.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to make sure we broke that part down. Mayor Nichols, just in listening to this and what EJ is saying here, I hear what he's saying, that you're not supposed to be looking at where incumbents live, but you've seen some of the different press that's out there. It looks like maybe Council Member Sawant, maybe Council President Juárez would be the only ones that will be pushed out. So when there are only two council members that could face this situation, does it become a difficult argument here when it comes to where these lines are being drawn and what happens to incumbents?
Well, for me, I am blissfully ignorant as to the address of any of the incumbent district council members, and I intend to remain blissfully ignorant in that regard. We need to make decisions, as EJ said, based on what is best for the city, and that is irrespective of how it might affect an individual incumbent or an individual who wants to run. We are going to build the districts that make the most sense for the next 10 years for the people of the city.
Okay, thank you for that. I wanted to make sure I brought up another issue here, which has been a difficult one for the state here. The state redistricting process had a lot of problems, broke the law, drew up many of its maps in secret last year, right before its deadline, a deadline which the commission missed. Then we had the chair, Sarah Augustine, resigned 2 months ago, upset that local lawmakers wouldn't defend the maps the mission created, which are now part of a federal court case. I know this is something separate, but EJ, how does the city of Seattle avoid these political missteps that the state took?
Yeah, for me, and I think for the general public, they probably wouldn't say that it's separate, right? One redistricting commission versus another to the public, it is all intertwined. And the fact that there were so many missteps and a real undermining of public trust in that process at the state level affects our work. And I think you can see from day one that our commission is taking transparency and public input and being as forthright and communicative with people as possible as our number one charge. And that includes setting deadlines far in advance of when we need to turn this in to the folks that are going to ultimately put this into law. But it also includes how we're designing our retreat when we ultimately come together to decide what maps we're going to put forward as our final drafts. It includes we are taking public comment. We've compiled those, we acknowledge that we've read them and we're responding to them. So there are some tough lessons that were learned there from the state example. And ultimately, we know that we have an example now of what not to do. And if we repeat that, that's on us. But I think so far we've done a good job of creating the rules, processes, and procedures that actually won't be a possibility.
Well,
Our aspiration is not.
Yeah, please, Mayor Nichols, if you would.
Our aspiration is not to repeat the experience of the state. And I think we have one big advantage, two big advantages in that regard. One, it's a nonpartisan government. And so trying to balance Republican precincts versus Democratic precincts versus others is not something that is in our DNA at all. And secondly, we're dealing with a much more finite geographic area. And so it's one that we know well. We don't know as well as the people who live in our various neighborhoods and communities, but we know well, and therefore we can take great care in terms of the lines that we draw and the districts that we end up with.
Thanks for dealing with that question there. And EJ, a quick check on a question that a resident asked me. Seeing as how our districts have grown so quickly, is there a possibility Seattle could add another district, maybe even another council member? Some thoughts on that?
I think that's a little bit beyond our scope.
Okay.
But, I think if the citizens of the city choose to add more people to their city council, that will probably be a referendum that is not involved in this process. I think more participation, the better from a personal standpoint. So, yeah.
Okay, got it. Mayor Nichols, I just thought I'd throw that out there because we have heard that from a few different people. Any thoughts on adding more council members and maybe more districts?
Well, I'll tell you, I served on the King County Council when it was 9 members, and then it expanded to 13 when King County and Metro merged. And I think 9, from my perspective, my opinion, is a very manageable number in terms of a council that can be effective. 13 did not work as well, and the county has now, by vote of the people, gone back to 9. So in a city of our size, I think that it's a manageable size. It's not perfect. There's no perfect number, but it seems to have worked historically here in Seattle.
Mayor Nichols, time to wrap up here. I wanted to ask you just how you digest all the feedback that you're taking in, because there are some people out there who don't like any of the 4 examples that have been presented. I'm sure you've heard something along those lines here. How do you take all this in, try to figure out this consensus here, and how big of a change are you anticipating to Seattle's district boundaries?
Well, we are dedicated to a system that has 1 person, 1 vote, and that means the districts need to be within 1% of each other. There are 3 districts that need to pick up at least 5,000 people, and District 7, as you point out, needs to be reduced by
about 18,000, yeah.
About 18,000 people. That's not going to be easy, but I think it is possible. I think we have the right people around the table to do that, and the public is engaging, letting us know the issues that they're concerned with. And I think with that tool, we'll be able to come up with a district map system that will make Seattle proud.
Great. EJ, some final words from you on this whole process. Are we going to see major changes to Seattle's political boundaries? And what message do you want to make sure that viewers take away from this whole process of redistricting?
Well, first and foremost, there will be major change, right? We cannot avoid that the city has grown substantially since the last time that these boundaries were created. And especially those that are living in areas that have seen the most growth, their boundaries will change the most. Those who don't have, I guess, the benefit probably of the city limits or a waterway, they will also see considerable movement in their boundaries. I think that's a good thing. I think that the most we can do and our best and highest use of time is making sure that these boundaries look like and best represent this community. So I'm excited for that prospect. I'm excited for the public to experience those new boundaries that hopefully match the population of today and not 2010. And that, when we look at all this feedback and all this participation that we're having, the best thing that I can think of going forward as we go through the public forums over the summer is that we have a ton of people deeply invested in sharing what is personal and important to them, to us as commissioners, so that we can make the best decision on their behalf. If we don't have public participation, these maps are not going to work. So I'm looking forward to that. I know my fellow commissioners are as well, and we hope to see everybody over the summer as we make these decisions.
A lot of important decisions ahead. thank you both for joining me there. And I wanted to make sure I let people know, I actually was learning more about this whole redistricting process. I talked with a city liaison about that to show you a little bit more about how you can participate in the process and even see how your district might change. Check it out. Elsa, there's an online tool that you wanted to show me because I'm in District 1. I want to try to figure out what could happen to my district when these lines are changing. Could you show that to us, please?
Yes, absolutely. This is a really handy tool that we have on our website. So this is the page we have right here. And then you go to how to participate, and it will pop up all these ways in which you can go, and then scroll all the way down to find the Seattle Redistricting Interactive Map. And this tool is going to take you to the current lines of the City Council right now. If you are like me, where you need to see streets and other landmarks, you're going to add on top of here a base map gallery, and then I like to choose this one that has streets, and then I go back to up here in my bar layers to add the different examples that we have and that the commission has put together as examples. So for instance, we have this one where the color teal in District 1 is what it would look like to add the number of people we need. So you see it's going up north. There's another option. These are not really proposals. These are just examples where you can see how the district would move over towards District 2 to the east.
That's amazing.
There's another one over here, number 3, that changes just a little bit up north here in downtown. So if you scroll down, you can see exactly where that line would cut. And this is where we need the participation of the public to see if this street, this line is the right thing to do. Then there's another option right here where in this example, the district would grow towards District 2, but also towards downtown.
A lot to look at here. And you can actually check out and create some of your own options too. Make sure you go to seattle.gov/redistricting. Thanks, Elsa. What are people saying on social media about redistricting Seattle? One person writes, the first 2 Seattle redistricting maps are gerrymandered. Throw them out and give us an option that cuts off Magnolia and gives it to D6. Another person says, Seattle needs additional council members. If we're staying with the district plan, we should have smaller districts or multiple council members in each district.
We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Coming up next week, a controversial effort to create social housing in Seattle. Affordable housing advocates are divided over a proposal that could be on the ballot this fall. We delve into Initiative 135 on the next City Inside Out. I hope you join us.